Municipal, municipal, municipal. Welcome, dear listeners, to the Vermont Stretch Public Access Radio News Program, now with the full support of the Killington Municipal Planning Council. And all it took was a few handshakes and careful donations. No bloodshed at all. Also welcome to the new Protectorate News Network. I am your host, Theodore Anders, a man with no experience in legislation who has decided to become a government body, a man wearing a PRT uniform that I took from a dead person. On that note, actually, to any surviving family of PRT Trooper James, I still have some of their personal effects that I found on their person. Where was I? Yes, as a man who has decided to become a government body, a man with no experience in legislation, I have found myself a curious correlation. All crimes are committed by the living. In light of this fact, I have decided to make life itself illegal. The crime is life, and the sentence is stern disapproval and judging looks. Welcome back, dear listeners, to Vermont Stretch Radio, the news you need to survive in today's worlds. I'm not going to lie, dear listeners, saying worlds still makes me laugh a little. Worlds. We live on multiple parallel worlds. I am eating bagels from another planet. I mean, there are enough worlds out there that we could just spread forever. A united humanity across millions and millions of worlds. Or we could just declare pointless wars on each other. Does that not sound fun to you? Well, apparently it does to the Wardens and their associate organization of slightly more military paramilitary capes. War. Earth cheat. Multi-trigger. When I decided to become a newsreader, I never really realized how much you needed to repeat yourself, so I'll just give you the key points. Riot, a group of angry workers. Trachea, a man dying to a wacky trigger event. Cheat, a world of religious fundamentalists that hate our guts. Now, in Megalopolis news, I continue to resent the missed opportunity to call our urban sprawl a megacity, something that I will agree to disagree with the Wardens on, unlike Gold Morning, which is of course a reasonable and sane choice of name compared with Golden Morning. Gold Morning just rolls off the tongue better, you see. It's a syllable shorter. Although some people out there can't seem to agree what Gold Morning even refers to. Does it refer to the start of Scion's interdimensional rampage, a morning turned gold as he obliterated the United Kingdom? Or does it refer to the end of Scion's rampage, that thing that all the heroes promise to tell you about when they're older? Older enough, of course, that they are dead or won't be held publicly accountable anymore. Furthermore, Gold Morning implies that it was a singular morning, which is a bit of a misnomer, as it was a rather lengthy affair that saw the heroes all scrambling about, making desperate last stands after desperate last stands after desperate last stands, to the point that, personally, I just prefer to think of Gold Morning as the start of Scion's interdimensional rampage for simplicity's sake. And, of course, the end of his rampage is something like Scion Day. That seems like a sane and rational name for it, really. Carried away. Apologies, dear listeners. Now, point is, in megacity traffic news, traffic accidents are on the up and up again. I highly recommend sunglasses because those buildings are awfully shiny and pose a very severe risk of distraction to both seasoned and new drivers. Personally, I think that personal transportation itself is a bit of a luxury in the megalopolis, and that car sharing needs to be more strongly encouraged in a world where people can barely afford food or housing, let alone private transportation for themselves. Now, moving on, listeners, last week we held our final entry in the disturbing and exciting series that was Master Stranger Awareness Month. We all loved Master Stranger Awareness Month. Now, this week, though, we were contacted by a stranger directly, actually, a stranger going by the name of Brainking, asking if we could put together a little compilation mixtape of all of our Master Stranger Awareness Month entries so that they could force their victims to listen to them, to which I reply, of course we can, Brainking, all of them. Even the one that you all seem to have forgotten, and even the one that I really didn't want to force my way through the first time. The one with the bastard offspring of that bastard heartbreaker. That's bastard as in a horrible person willing to destroy people's lives for their own sick enjoyment, and not a bastard as in an illegitimate child. Now, amusingly enough though, Brainking also supplied their PRT threat rating, which implies both that they are from Earth bait and that they are insecure enough about their power that they think an arbitrary rating assigned by the government organization as a shorthand form of advice about the level of force needed to respond to them rather than a measure of the power itself is a bit of a way to show off and measure their self-worth. I think that this is a good launching point, dear listeners, to talk about threat ratings and names and what they can tell us. Now, Brainking alleges to be a Stranger 6. A stranger, for those of you not paying attention to Master Stranger Awareness Month, or just those of you hiding behind the couch and sneaking a peek at the radio every so often, a stranger is a cape whose powers allow them to play the subtle back and forth of spy games. And a 6 is a pretty big number, actually. It means that PRT troopers are having to break out the passwords, shoot people on sight, not trust anybody that moves their head around a corner for more than an inch. They also stated that they had a sub-rating of Thinker 2. Now this tells me that they have a weak advantage from their power, one that improves their senses, but not so much that a trained individual can't deal with them. But it is a sub-rating, which implies that it is not a separate power, but rather something paired with their original power, the one providing their stranger rating. Now, here is a really fun trick for those of you at home. Normally, we can use a cape's name as a good starting point, since a lot of people like to have really apt names. 9 times out of 10, a cape will go crazy if they're calling themselves something entirely unrelated to their personhood or their attire. But, for example, a striker with a name like Current Affairs probably has electricity powers. Sometimes, though, they just have a name themed around their costume, like Chuckles the Clown, but I don't think anybody with a brain-themed costume is going to be very sneaky. So in this case, we will assume that Brainking implies that he has a power that affects the minds of others. And this lets us rule out any stranger power that is of hiding him sort of deal. But despite that name, Brainking, he doesn't actually have a master rating, so we can rule out a power that's allowing him to influence other people. So, I am going to assume that he has a weak thinker power that is letting him perceive other people's senses, but this is applied in a way that lets him predict other people's field of view, and they're using this to infiltrate places, avoiding cameras, avoiding bodyguards, and this is what grants them the stranger rating. They have a good record of using it like that, and the threat rating begins to go up with every loss so that the PRT can save face and make their troops take someone with a name like Brainking seriously. But since the thinker rating itself is weak, it's not really much use in a fist fight or a firefight, and they can't use it as well in a head-on confrontation. I'm probably wrong here, dear listeners. I'm not the best with powers. I never really took any of the courses, never really read much of the documentation or literature, but I think that all it takes is a little observation, a little experience, and a little imagination. And if you're listening in Brainking, was I right? Moving on from there, politics news. We had agreed recently that I would actually voice an opinion on the candidates running for mayor of the megacity. and I got a call from an old friend a little while back, and now it looks like this station is hereby on Team Gene, as we lead up to the mayoral race for the megalopolis, or as we here in Vermont too are continuing to hope to henceforth refer to it, Megacity Gimel. We have to ask ourselves, where do our candidates stand? Who are they? Miss John Wine. She is a sensible and intelligent woman who prefers practical things, as we can of course tell from her steel wedding ring and her gaudy yellow sports car. She believes that all we need to do is make sacrifices and pull together in an hour of need in order to push forwards. And that is why she wears practical clothing and drives around a gaudy yellow sports car. She also has a great message that she preaches but doesn't practice. She's part of a package deal, though. That husband of hers, you can count on him. Mrs. John Wine needs to stop using primary colours, and her husband is a bit of a nerd, but those are my only complaints about the two of them. Their policies are fine, and honestly I don't think there is much to dislike about their approach to things. They like to play this game without really sacrificing their dignity or their principles. By contrast, of course, let's look at the rest of the competition. First up is Ms. Kiley. Sierra Kiley. A symbol of corruption in plain sight. I mean, she's just there, proving that you can get away with any crime you like so long as the greater good still needs you. I mean, I wouldn't know about the greater good, would I? But it seems to me like it's a lot of defeat in the details. Miss Kiley's haircut is a sign of progress and pushing through disaster that looks like she gets it cut every time Brockton Bay goes through a great disaster. As a Brockton Bay local business head, of course, Ms. Kiley is a puppet of the Undersiders. I'm sorry, Tattletale, you have so many talents, but I do not think ventriloquism is one of them. Hey, Wardens. If you are listening, you should know that some people are trying to turn over a new leaf and stop being villains, and those are the people that you should try and be nice and accommodating to, and the Undersiders aren't those people. I'm sorry if I'm a little biased here, listeners, but they aren't even trying to hide this. Sierra Kiley's holdings before and after the Undersiders take over Brockton Bay are orders of magnitude apart. Also, her haircut is abominable, and that alone should be reason not to vote for her. In summary, people of the Undersiders, puppet of the Undersiders, bad haircut, and don't vote for her unless you support Rachel Lint letting her dogs eat your children. Up next, we have Mr. Druck. Mr. Druck bills himself as the working class saviour. Good luck, Druck. I hear Earthbait is just full of self-replicating macrobots, wandering serial mass murderers, and disgruntled PRT employees at the moment, and he wants us all to go back. Earthbait was turned into a barren and blasted hellscape through which nightmares prance and play, an endless and desolate world where the strong and the mad rule. It's not that we can't go back to that, it's just that it would be so very, very easy to go back to it, and it would be the end of us. One day, when things get too bad or I cross a line too far, maybe I'll just take that long walk out into the cursed earth, not to bring justice to a land without justice, but to wallow in its absence and wither away like an unattended houseplant. It would be so easy to go back, but I owe you more than that, dear listeners. In summary, Bruck the Builder is an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about, and he deserves a vacation to Killington this winter. Not this Killington, the Killington where snow has settled on top of ash, on top of bodies, because that's what going back to Earthbait means. Don't vote for him unless you want to ignore the giant cities we just spent 2 years building and the housing developments that we didn't just spend 2 years building. Mr. Buckner is our final candidate. The media mogul. He shouldn't be mayor because he owns all the media. There, that is a fair and logical statement. There is a conflict of interest there, and that is too much power for a man to hold. I look forward to the rumoured Maggie Holt spin-off, and I think that there is something sad and morose about how we'll have to make sets and pretend to play in all these worlds that won't have ever seen something as scary and destructive as good old GM. But, all that being said, he is the only candidate whose conflict of interest is obvious and mild compared to hidden and sinister. Vote for him for a government carefully steering public perceptions, but not in that skeevy way that the PRT liked to do it. We are finally moving on to something that I have been putting off now a little bit. I have recently received a message. 2 messages. One from the Wardens. The other was from the Norfair disaster. It was a picture of her in her mother's PRT uniform, reworked into a sort of costume by the tacit addition of a few streaks of red paint. No mask. Her identity has been hard to keep secret, what with the whole creepy eyes thing, and thanks to the end of the world, she doesn't really have anything else to do or anything she wants to protect. Her eyes flicker violently in that picture, and it really hurts just to look at it, but I am feeling pretty encouraged when I'm not feeling sick looking at it. The Wardens, their message had nothing bad to say to me. They just wanted to drop me a friendly reminder that they are not a monolithic authority of villains, only in a few more words than that. Dear listeners, take it from someone who I hate this. Listeners, there are things that I cannot tell you, because if I do, then the Wardens will kill me. Not because they have secrets that they kill people over, God knows that they do, but because they honestly believe that I am not a human being. I hate having to keep secrets that I never agreed to keep. I hate people being expected to sit by and let other people make decisions for them that they would never agree to. I hate being bullied and cowed by the people in charge, the people who are only in charge because they have powers and claim to know best. And I don't want to be the man shouting that Soylent Green is people either, because I want people to be happy. Do you hear that? I want people to be happy. Other people. That is a normal and human thing to want. I am normal and human. I want to sit in a corner of the world and complain about things. I want digital watches. I have friends, a friend, a life. I have a small town radio show that broadcasts to an entire state of scattered settlements. I think that we will conclude our broadcast there, dear listeners. Good night, Killington. Brazil, where hearts were entertaining June, we stood beneath an amber moon and softly whispered, someday soon we kissed and clung together then. Tomorrow was another day. The morning found me miles away, with still a million things to say. Now, when twilight dims the sky above, recalling thrills of our love, there's one thing that I'm certain of. Return I will to all Brazil, Brazil. This was a fan production for Parahuman audio community content. Worm, Ward, and the Parahuman series are owned and written by J.C. McCrae. Check out Worm at parahumans.wordpress.com and Ward at parahumans.net. Honestly, if you don't know what those are, why are you listening? They're really good, and you've probably had a lot of the plot points spoiled for you by now, although I've tried to avoid that sort of thing. For the Ward audiobook project, or the Wardiobook project, as I continually insist on calling it in an attempt to make it catch on, go visit parahumanaudio.com. It's a bunch of really talented people bringing Wildbow's works to life. Now, for an entirely unrelated bunch of really cool dudes that like to talk about the literary quality of Ward and to analyze the story arc by arc, go check out We've Got Ward, a podcast where two friends take turns to say, I love this. Now, we're going to be taking a bit of a hiatus after this episode while I figure out some stuff about plot and characters and direction and what to do with being up to date with Ward. I would like to give the greatest thanks that I can to Rain for hosting us and being patient every time I had to cry to him that it wasn't uploading. I'd like to thank Kitius for beta reading and encouraging and being an awesome person and a great friend. And I'd like to thank you, dear listeners, for being a dear and listening.